Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you. Featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your very best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today, my guest is Michelle Buonincontri. Now, she says that in retrospect, her journey began as a child. She says, I've always have been drawn to making a difference in the world, to be a contribution. Whoa, that's great. You know, going to an all-girls high school was a wonderful experience. And I'm going to stop myself from telling more about you because I want to know, actually, when you say that it was a wonderful experience, I want you to explain that to our audience. But hold on a minute. So let's just continue. The culture really encouraged and solidified her role as a woman leader. Our school motto, she says, was, quote, the total woman. It reinforced that we as women can be anything we choose. And I love that statement. So I want to welcome to my show Michelle Buonincontri.
Oh, thank you, Susan, for having me with you here today.
My pleasure having you. Now, we were talking about at the beginning what it meant for you to be in a school that gave you such a great experience and the inspiration to do something very special in your life.
You know, it's funny. I think for most people, at first blush, they would think an all-boys, school or an all-girls school. They kind of shudder. I had a wonderful Catholic grammar school experience. It was co-ed, and I did go on to all-girls school, and it really became obvious, I guess especially in those years as we're becoming teenagers, how we want to look good, right? We don't want to raise our hand as girls and look too smart.
You're right.
So we wait to see if the boys raise their hands, we just kind of pull back. And being in an all-girls school really strips that away, and it really promotes almost a competitiveness amongst us as women that isn't there when there are boys present when you're teenagers.
Now, that's an interesting point. When you talk about competition, are women more competitive than men?
I don't know. I have to be honest, in my life, I think there's like two kinds of women. There are those that are competitive, but in a way where they don't support each other. Mm-hmm. And then there are those who are competitive in a supporting way. I recently heard this quote. I thought it was awesome. And it was like, when we educate a man, we're educating him. When we educate a woman, we're really educating a village, because we bring our friends, our family, our children into the circle of knowledge and education. And that's, and I've been fortunate enough that most of the women in my life fit in that category.
That's interesting. Now, when you talk about women and you talk about men, things have changed a lot. Now, there are so many women in the workforce, so many women becoming doctors, lawyers, you name it. So when you were young, you said, well, the men were the ones who really got everything. Today, as I said, it changed. And what do you attribute that to?
If we just look back historically, it seems that, in the early 1900s, with men going to war, women were really stepping up and taking more of a role. Mm-hmm. But if we really look back in history, thousands and thousands of years, there were matriarchal societies. And it was really in the last couple of thousand years that we moved to more of patriarchal societies. And I think in the past, where they were more matriarchal, they were more cooperative. Mm-hmm. And when they became patriarchal, the women became less partners, and we were kind of moved to a lesser role of staying home, which isn't bad because my mom stayed home and I wanted to be a stay-home mom. I think there's a huge importance in that. But we've now moved towards, I think when women got a taste of education and working, we've now moved to two career families, and I think that that's kind of where the problem lies.
Yeah. That's interesting. Now, at the beginning of the show, you started to talk about various things. I remember thinking there's good stress and there's bad stress. And in your case, what do you think is good and what do you think is bad?
From stress?
Well, not only from stress, but from being a total woman. Well, I think that, stress, I think, is good, and what do you think is bad? From stress? Well, not only from stress, but from being a total woman.
Um, well, I think I think what they were really trying to say is you can do anything you want. I don't think they were really trying to say you have to do it all alone. And I think as women, we sometimes tend to think that we need to do that. I think we're more socialized than men, that we share, but we take it on as I have to do it all. So I'm the caregiver, I keep my house clean, I cook, I educate my children, and then we've piled on, I have a career besides. Mm-hmm. And that creates, I think, bad stress. Yeah. When we can have a partner that we share with and say, hey, you know, if we're both going to work, maybe you're going to do some of the house cleaning, or you're going to do some of the shoveling of the children, then, you know, that's more of a good stress. I remember for myself personally, years ago, my husband and I had gone to marriage counseling, and one of the things the woman said to me was, you know, you have to take care of yourself first, because when the well is dry, you can't take care of anyone else.
Yeah, she's so right, isn't she? Now, 20 years, you were led into a career by becoming a certified financial planner. First thing I want you to do is to define what that is, and then I want to understand, because I thought that was really a male kind of thing, is why certified financial planner? What was it that made you desire to have a career like that?
Well, I originally started in financial services, working more with business clients and partners and helping define their goals, their responsibilities, and coming up with strategies. And I loved my job for many years, and I worked for JP Chase. And as we merged, the culture really changed. And I started to think, what could I do to really make an impact in individual lives and families? Mm-hmm. And around 2005, I really started feeling that yearning. And I think it was around 2007, my husband at the time left Chase, and he went to take another position. That's where we actually met, and we worked together. And we met with a certified financial planner who's a female, was a friend of a friend. Mm-hmm. And she was going to handle the rollovers, 401k, and his pension. And after we met with her, it was really my husband at the time that said to me, you know, you could do what she does. Sure. I really think you could. And I think you'd enjoy it, because I always handled the finances. Mm-hmm. And so she was very kind. She met with me and explained to me what the educational background was that was needed. And the more I looked into it, I really saw that it was an opportunity for me to transition a skill set that I already had. So I was already proficient with meeting with clients, helping define their goals, really kind of digging in at the of what's going on, because a lot of times people come to the table with a preconceived notion of what the solution should be, and really helping them to partner with a solution instead, and having them be empowered that they're part of the process. And I'm very detail-oriented, but I also can see big picture. Mm-hmm. And I saw that being a certified financial planner would allow me to use these skills, but really impact people on a personal level, instead of like in a corporate environment.
Yeah. You know, people in our audience like to take away something from a discussion, discussion between you and me and various other people whom I have on my show. So let's get into that a little bit. Give them very strong, and I look, this is a very maybe ridiculous question, but I want you to tell them some things that you tell your clients, because, again, every show that is successful, people can take away something important, and I want to know what that is from you.
Okay. So I guess I'll start with what financial planning is, because I think there's some value in there.
Yep.
Financial planning is like a holistic process, and we really look at somebody's whole life. A lot of people think, oh, that's investments, and it's not really. It's really understanding somebody's goals and objectives, and you have to really have a relationship and create one with that person. Part of the process is really managing emotions, perspectives, becoming a partner with that person in their life, understanding what's important to them, and then kind of zooming out, like once we have the specifics and understand what's important to them, kind of zooming out and taking this 18,000-foot view and saying, okay, this is what's important to them. What does their life look like? We look at it from a retirement plan point of view, investments, insurance, what we call risk management. So it could be loss of income, you know, if a spouse passed away or someone became disabled. We're looking at estate planning. What are their wishes? What happens if they become disabled? in the interim, what happens when they pass away. It's not just about having a will. And really helping them to then say, okay, this is what you want to accomplish. This is where you are today, and how can we create this roadmap to help get you there?
Let me stop you for a second, Michelle, because I'm going to want you to continue. This is very important information. But how does one choose a financial planner? Because there are tons of financial planners out there. I mean, tons. So how do you choose one?
I think the best advice is you really want someone that you resonate with, that when you're talking to them, that they get what you're saying. It's more someone that's going to be an active listener, because if you go, let's say, and I would say interview tons of folks. Don't just pick one because somebody said they're great. I mean, go interview them. And you want to feel that they're really listening to you, and they're trying to draw out and drill down what's important to you. If they're just promising you a return and they're saying, I can do this and I can do that, most of that isn't really realistic on the surface. I mean, a lot of it has to do with investments, and that has to do with the market. And this is one of the things I tell my clients is that, investing in the market is like gambling. There is no real guaranteed outcome, and we have to have a strategy. And so they need to understand their risk tolerance and their risk capacity. And so if you're working with someone that's making all these promises and they're not really listening to what's important to you, I would think that's really the crux. There's communication and there's a relationship. And so if you can feel that, that's the basis, not someone's going to give me a 10% return and my friend got 12 or this guy said 5.
Right. Now, it's an interesting point that you make because there, as I said before, there are so many financial planners out there, and you get these invites all the time to come someplace and have a dinner with them. But more important is now that we have a different president, okay, we have Donald Trump coming, and, things are absolutely going to change in the economy. Now, is that going to have an impact on you as a financial planner?
I don't know. Again, I don't have a crystal ball.
Well, what would you like? What would you like to change? Is there something you would like to change that really has not been serving you well?
No, I mean, I think that as a financial planner, if I'm going to, I hold myself to a fiduciary standard. I'm a fee-only planner. And if I know that I'm already doing what's in the best interest of my client and I'm really interested in them as individuals, it's not going to change based on the environment. Like the stock market, for example, a lot of things you can take economics and they'll talk about relationship between stocks and bonds and interest rates and all these things. And there are certain indicators and things that quote unquote should happen. Yeah. But in the end, it's really driven by the perception of the consumer. If they're getting scared or they're in and out, you can't control that, and you don't know which way it's going to sway. Yeah. We would just, look at what you just said with Trump. People all were predicting that the market was going to go down if he won. Well, that didn't really happen. No,
that's really interesting, too. Now, you are a divorce financial planner. A divorce financial planner, explain that to me. I mean, how did you get involved in divorce financial planning as opposed to something else?
I went through my own divorce. It began probably in 2009 initially. At the time, I had been introduced to the concept of the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst designation while I was completing school for my CFP, I guess the year before. And I looked into it, and I started to find out about it. Then I started to go through my own divorce. And I really saw how even though I had been trained as a certified financial planner and I had experience in financial services, that I was marginalized during my own divorce process. Oh. Nothing I said meant anything.
Now, why is that?
Attorneys were involved. My husband at the time and I had actually gone to a mediator, and we worked all the details out, and it was going to be very inexpensive, simple, fair, and, as time goes on, people get involved on the outside who have opinions, and so eventually it switched from that venue to attorneys, and it really became a very costly endeavor, emotionally and financially. I saw my sisters go through divorces, friends, and after I completed my own divorce and I moved, I said, I really think I want to become certified in this area because I want to make sure that other families don't go through what we went through.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on with the financial planning situation. Again, we're dealing with a whole new administration, and this administration wants to close the borders. They want people to have jobs. So if that happens and people get jobs and they have lots of money, or more money, should I say that, should they leave it in cash, or should they invest it? Is it, even if you don't know anything about stocks, should you buy stocks? Give us a little of your, real smarts. I think that's what I'll call it. What should people do when they start to make money, and when should they do it?
You really can't make a statement like that. It's way too generalized. Everybody's different, and you really need to understand an individual's situation. And it really starts with the beginning and the most basic point, and starting point is really cash flow. People need to look at their own life, and they need to look at themselves from a cash flow standpoint. The most important thing is really for someone to have an emergency fund. Ideally, as a financial planner, we would love people to have 1 to 2 years worth of income saved, in case something happened. Mm-hmm. That's not really realistic. Most people don't do that. Some do, but most don't. Mm-hmm. I would say you need to look at your life and say, do I have an emergency fund? Do I have at least 6 months worth of savings? And when I say savings, I mean in a CD or an account that has no risk, where you're earning nothing. And people say, oh, I'm earning nothing, I'm losing money. Mm-hmm. Well, no, there's a price for safety, right? So if you're not earning anything, but you're not losing anything. So this needs to be the safest money you have, even if it's an account earning 0.001. Because the point of it, money always has a purpose. In this particular bucket, it's safety to cover you in case of an emergency. Whatever happens, you got sick, you lost your job, your car broke. Once you have that 6 months, then you need to start looking at, where are the gaps in my retirement plan? How much do I really need to save for the lifestyle that I think I want to live? Mm-hmm. And that's a complicated process, even figuring out what that looks like. There are a lot of considerations. Mm-hmm. Where are you going to live? What do you currently have? Healthcare is huge. A lot of people's retirement plans don't take into account the cost of healthcare, particularly when they're older. And that could be a huge part of their plan or expense that they haven't accounted for.
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Once you know that gap, now you can start to say, where would I put it, right?
Right.
And is it going to be in a deferred account? Is it going to be in an after-tax account? So you can't really give anybody, I'll do it here or put it there.
Yeah. Now, because you are a divorce financial planner, one of the questions that I have is if clients only have a house or maybe a 401k, why would divorce financial planning make sense as there is very little to divide?
It's so funny that you said that because that's really, I think, a common almost misconception. And I think that the answer to that is taxes. Most people don't take into consideration the after-tax effect of what they're deciding. So, you really need to look, let's just say somebody was going to keep the house. Is there depreciation that maybe on that home that's been taken because somebody had a home business? And even if you don't claim depreciation, if you have a home-based business, the IRS doesn't really care. They want you to recapture that when you sell it, which decreases your cost basis, which means potentially you'll pay more in gains. And so you have to look at, is there going to be a gain that might impact that person as a single person if they sold the house later? So does it make more sense? Or does it make more sense for them to sell it now as a couple where they can be under the exemption for the $500,000 in capital gains? So it could even just be a conversation with the divorce financial analyst for an hour. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? I had a friend actually was in a situation where there was just a home and a 401k, and this individual really could have saved a considerable amount of wealth for their family had we just had a conversation. And what I mean is they just decided to divide the 401k. Right. So this individual was in a high tax bracket, had to pay a 10% penalty, and he had to pay the taxes at his rate, and then, the money was given to the other spouse. Had we had a conversation, we could have been discussed, well, perhaps But what would really make more sense would be to have a quadro, to divide that in half, have that half go to the other spouse, and before it was invested or rolled over to their IRA, they could have made a withdrawal under IRS ruling 72TC that would have, prevented, or they would have been able to withdraw the money without the 10% penalty because it was incident to a divorce, and the other spouse was in a much lower tax bracket. So it really made sense for them to make the withdrawal.
Ah, interesting. Now, if a person gets divorced and they have to, they have to pay for everything because their spouse doesn't want to give them anything. Is there some kind of formula that you would discuss with them?
I primarily work with couples that want to resolve their marriage amicably. And so when you're in that kind of situation, we can really decide whatever we think is fair.
Right.
So there are parameters in certain states around spousal support, but particularly here in Arizona, in the end, it's really what the judge decides or you decide amongst yourselves. And the gamut can be here anywhere from, this was shared with me by several attorneys who had been to a panel with some judges. They kind of went through a scenario that you're talking about where a couple was married for many, many years, maybe 30 years, and the wife was a stay-at-home mom and really didn't have any skills in the workplace. And spousal support and the like went anywhere from she gets nothing because she can get a job to support for the rest of her life.
Wow.
And then varying degrees in between.
Yeah. Now, is every different state different in the way that they do things? So you live in Arizona, and I live in Florida, and there are people who live all over the country. Now, is it different in every state, the way investments and taxes and all of these things come together?
Well, from a tax point of view, I mean, that's federal at the IRS level as far as capital gains and things, and then every state has their own tax laws as well. So yes, they're going to be different.
Can you explain what financial gains are, what kind of gains, and what it means?
Well, I'm not speaking as a tax professional, but if usually you hold an investment for more than a year, they would fall under the long-term capital gains ruling, which is preferential, so it's not going to be taxed at somebody's ordinary income rate. It would be lower depending what what bracket you fall into. And then if you sold it underneath, if you only held it for underneath a year, it would be considered short-term. And so if I was in the 25% ordinary tax bracket and I held, I had a mutual fund for 30 days, it would be taxed at my, let's say, 25% rate. Versus if I had it longer term, it would be at a lower rate.
Interesting.
But then other things, like, what am I trying to think of? Like if people own art, they're going to be taxed at a different rate. And so there's intricacies. So all of that really you would work out with your tax professional. But when I work with couples from a divorce planning standpoint, the software that I use is smart enough to know all those rules. So if part of our planning we're talking about selling rental property or selling the marital home or selling various pieces of types of investments, there's actually, coding to let it know what type of investment is, and it is updated yearly on what are the different rates, so all those different categories, and then based on the income of the individuals, it figures all that out.
Now, we're almost done, but I would like you to take me through a scenario. Someone comes into or calls you on the phone or comes into your office and they say, we just lost. We have $1 million, okay? And we have no idea, absolutely no idea what the best thing for us is. So you sit them down, and where do you begin and where do you end?
So you're talking from a financial planning standpoint versus
Correct.
From the divorce financial planning?
Correct.
The first thing is to gather as much data about the couple as you can, because it's not just about that investment. So we're going to start, again, from a cash flow point of view, and we're going to figure out all their expenses that they currently have, and we're going to try to model those out, get a sense of when do they want to retire, What are their goals that they're trying to meet? Are they looking to downsize their home at a certain point? Are they looking to leave a legacy to their children? All those things are important. We're going to map out the expenses, and we're going to map out their income. Does somebody have a pension? When is that going to kick in? When does it make most sense to draw from that pension to optimize the distribution? Somebody has Social Security. When does it make sense? What's the strategy that we might use for drawing on that Social Security? What time, is one person going to wait longer so they can build up their distribution amount? All those things are going to come into play, and you have to figure out all those things first. Mm-hmm. Then you really kind of back into what does somebody have left to invest. Right. Maybe they don't have anything. Maybe, it's about building the emergency fund first. Mm-hmm. And then it's about adding to retirement. And then at that point, when they're ready, we can look at their financial situation and say, based on what they have, can they take more risk? Are they okay with taking more risk? Mm-hmm. There's also a play. People like to talk about risk tolerance all the time, which is how would people feel, right, if the market went down? But it's also about risk capacity. If somebody has a lot of money already, why do they need to take more risk?
Right.
They don't need to.
Yeah.
Some people like to, right, because it's like a gambling kind of effect.
Right.
But do they need to? And then you might have a situation where somebody has very little money, and even though their risk capacity is low, right, because they need everything they have, they might need to take more risk to increase their chances of actually meeting their retirement plan goal.
How interesting that is. Well, today my guest has been Michelle Buonincontri, and she is a financial planner working with divorced people, and she has tons of information to give you. Now, Michelle, if people want to find out more about what you have to say, or they want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
They can visit my website at www.beingmindfulindivorce.com. or email me at michelle@beingmindfulindivorce.com.
And if they, do you have a book, or do you have any other way to give people information?
Oh, at this time, I have some articles that I've written that are on my LinkedIn and then also my website, and I'm actually in the process of collaborating with a colleague who's a certified divorce coach. And in the next year or so, we're going to be doing something around the financial impacts on settlement choices in divorce, and also talking about the emotional and the control dynamic that can kind of come into play as part of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, last but not least, I'm going to switch things around for a second, and then we'll finish the show. But if you were to ask yourself a question about financial planning, what would that be?
I was going to ask myself a question. I guess, and I'm supposed to be like a client?
Correct.
I would say, are you looking at your life from a holistic standpoint? Because we don't live in a silo. And I find that most people focus on investments, and investments is just one piece. You need to look at investments. You need to look at taxes, estate planning, retirement benefits, employee benefits, and yeah. Are you living in a silo?
Yeah.
Are you looking at the big picture and then looking at how they all interlock and affect each other?
Well,
in meeting your goals.
Well, you've given our audience a lot of information, and I think it's really important that they listen to you. But we want to say thank you, Michelle Buonincontri, to be on the Susan Brender Show. It's absolutely a pleasure, and I hope you'll come again.
Thank you for listening to the Susan Brender Show. To be a guest, email sebrender@yahoo.com.